Careful. You'll cut your arm off.
Look, I know you're not gonna believe me, but it's like this thing wanted me to take it.
You're right. I don't believe you. Now hand me the lightsaber.
Surprise! You asked for it, you got it, folks. Happy May the 4th, everyone. Today, we're adding a new review series to the roster by diving back into one of the most refined, interconnected, tightly knit, and beloved Star Wars shows out there, Star Wars Rebels. The adulation this show receives in the current day is the reception it should have had upon its conclusion, but until recently, with various animated gems like Ahsoka Tano, Bo-Katan, Cad Bane and Garazeb Orrelios making their live-action debuts, much of the fanbase wasn't incentivized enough to dive into the wonderful world of the animated content, deeming it almost too childish and unimportant until now. Well, to those that held off for so long, I'd like to personally welcome you to this side of the fence, as you now understand the brilliance of shows like the Clone Wars, Bad Batch and Rebels and what they've done to support the franchise, and in some ways have now become better than much of the live action based material we've received.
No, he's got a point.
And to those of you that are adamant they'll never consider or recognise the animated content as necessary information, I'll leave you with this. Go fuck. Sorry, you don't know what you're missing.
Got it?
Upon Disney's acquisition back in 2012, much of the animated fanbase were rabid and hungry for blood as we'd lost a little over 2 seasons of additional content with the cast of the Clone Wars.
Vicious, heartless bastards!
So to then throw a new series at us felt like they were taking a piss on their grave and shitting in our Cheerios. However, once we calmed down and settled in to at least try this colourful Kenner-toy cornucopia, many began to agree that the stylizations were rather bizarre, but the narrative thread and plot itself is excellent.
Excellent.
Rebels is undoubtedly a more humorous installment that begins with a more vivid and exuberant approach to a dark spot in the Star Wars timeline and applies comical dialogue to traumatized characters who all act out in their own ways but ultimately come together for the greater good. Not to mention the stellar cast behind this rambunctious bunch of outcasts that bring incredible depth and nuance to such a fragmented team, that, as I said, unite over a common goal whilst struggling to battle their own pasts and inner demons only to unify as a family by the end, ultimately strong enough to overcome their tribulations with support from each other and collectively take it to the Empire better than they ever could alone. And it's for these reasons, and so many more, I want to remind you all of the brilliance this show possesses by delving into the wider narrative, the individual struggles and successes, and look back at where they started and how they finish. I also want to dig into the contextual elements and subtextual beats that underscore some incredible character moments and generally point out the deeper meanings and the execution of villains in this series as well.
What fun!
And essentially point out exactly why Rebels is an overlooked gem that wraps itself up with a bow by the end and lays the groundwork, for now at least, where we're about to see these stars actualised in live action in just a couple of months' time in the Ahsoka series to finish off what they started here against one of the franchise's most formidable foes. So without further ado everybody, let's dive into our opening episode. We begin with the chilling presence of Darth Vader discussing matters with the Grand Inquisitor, where Vader instructs him to locate the children of the Force and ultimately wipe them out along with any potential masters that may train them, as the Emperor has sensed a disturbance rising against him and the Empire.
Be afraid. Be very afraid.
Cut to one of those very disturbances looking over the plains of Lothal right as an Imperial cruiser arrives overhead and the young lad takes off to the city in the middle distance. We see the beginnings of the Imperial regime on world and how they start to terrorise the inhabitants when our young Ezra Bridger bumps into one of the officers and nabs his comlink to cause a distraction and save a local shopkeeper, only to then steal a few fruits as a reward. He then follows the officers to a group of troopers in the centre of town loading up speeders ready to deliver cargo across the city when he starts to feel a pull within himself that directs his attention to a nearby pedestrian later named Kanan Jarrus, who responds similarly by looking around as well. Afterwards, Aladdin sees Kanan making informative gestures to a Mandalorian and Lasat nearby, later named Sabine Wren and Garazeb Orrelios respectively, where Sabine walks up and drops an explosive onto one of the speeders which blows up and creates chaos for a moment that sends the Imperials directly into a trap by all involved.
Good job.
As they're about to retrieve the cargo, Ezra drops in and swipes the bike, and after a few hair-raising moments along a freeway outside the city, Ezra makes a ballsy move to keep his loot, and the gang's ship, the Ghost, arrives to collect him. They jettison out of the planet after the brief skirmish, only to return later to Lothal with Zeb and Sabine delivering foods to the locals, while Hera and Kanan drop off weapons for money and information from a local smuggler named Vizago, who we later find out tells them that a group of Wookiee slaves are being moved by the Empire. During this time, Ezra seemingly has an existential crisis about his position in the galaxy upon seeing what they're all doing for others, and starts to feel the connection that he felt again with Kanan, but originating inside the Ghost. After investigating, he finds both a lightsaber and holocron in Kanan's quarters, and after Kanan intercepts him, he instructs him to leave, when it's revealed that he expected Ezra to take the holocron. Sometime later, Kanan calls a meeting to go after the Wookiees and free them, only for Ezra to become involved in this plan, when after Kanan, Sabine, Zeb and Chopper get on board the Imperial shuttle supposedly housing the Wookiees, a cruiser appears out of hyperspace led by Agent Kallus introduced earlier in the episode, and it arrives to intercept them and they realise it's a trap. Now, I understand that this was aired as a two-parter, but I need to stretch the content pool out where I can, so come back next week for the rest of my thoughts regarding the season opener and everything that we were offered here, but for now at least, I want to at least look at the fundamentals of this episode and explain who our core cast are.
I'm listening.
It cannot be understated that the vibrancy to the show in just the first episode, whilst emphasising the muted nature of the Empire, was crafted almost perfectly. Lothal was and will always be a gorgeous setting to look at, despite the egregious actions committed by the Empire on it over the course of the series, and we'll soon see possesses a depth of lore and relevancy to the legacy of the Jedi and the Force than we could have ever assumed. This series unashamedly utilises classic John Williams motifs and notes that resonate with the oldest of fans and inspire the newest, with such an immersive pull of music that emphasise the darkest times and underscore the emotional moments that hit you right where you're supposed to feel it.
My emotions! My emotions!
The pacing of this episode was speedy without rushing, and levelled enough that it didn't feel like a drag. The plot is simple enough as an introduction to know that they're stealing what they are to provide themselves with information whilst supporting a community of people feeling the oppression of the Empire. As for the design choices, they are particularly basic when it comes to the character models of course, but as I mentioned in the intro, the charm to Rebels is in its story, the interconnected nature of it and how compelling each of our core six are. Starting of course with our resident street rat and very own Aladdin, Ezra Bridger. He's bizarrely the first of his kind to my memory at least in Star Wars who's a thief with a conscience.
I smell profit.
To add a little bit of context, Ezra lost his parents to the Empire and naturally has a chip on his shoulder over that, and it caused him to lash out against anyone who would show him a shred of compassion, as the only love he ever wanted to feel was that of his parents again. He's presented to us as a cocky little shit who is more than prepared for most scenarios around the city, given he's grown up there, but is ultimately just a very misunderstood young lad. And as he develops a relationship with the crew of the Ghost, he realises that both Kanan and Hera start to fill in those roles that he's missing, providing him with guiding light and moral compass respectively, but among everything that he could have ever prepared for, one could not have accounted for Kanan Jarrus. A former apprentice during the Clone Wars, who thanks to his master Depa Billaba managed to escape Order 66, as seen in the opening episode for the first season of the Bad Batch. Much of his past can be explored in the Kanan comics, if you're curious, and I would highly recommend that series, but just to give you a rundown, Kanan is a Jedi hiding in plain sight, and is empathetic to the plight of the people in the galaxy, and offers his services and abilities to better protect those around him.
It's a bold strategy, Cotton. Let's see if it pays off for him.
His journey throughout the show is incredible, and as it is currently, he's overprotective of his status as a Force wielder, let alone a Jedi, but we begin to see those barriers drop when he realises that he is strong enough to go toe-to-toe with the worst, and take on an apprentice as well, shaping, moulding, supporting and informing him enough to become a leader and guardian who manages to take out the Empire's biggest cards at the end, and ultimately his path helps to drive the actions of everyone else around him, but before that, we see a redemption arc unlike any other in the series, and as it is right now in this episode alone, you can see his guarded nature, but you understand why when Ezra finds the lightsaber. Now, speaking of hardened warriors who escaped a massacre, we have our rare hairless Wookiee, Garazeb Orrelios, a Lasat honor guard who lost his people at the hands of the Empire and has carried that guilt with him ever since, believing he failed his people but will soon find out that things aren't as they appear. Until then though, he's a curmudgeonal beast who has a heart of gold but skin of steel that rarely lets anyone in. But as the series progresses, we learn that the walls he's built around himself are because of an internal torment he's learnt to carry, and tries to fill that void with good acts and laying the smackdown on stormtroopers.
Oh, forget it. Told you they wouldn't buy it.
You didn't exactly give them a chance to buy it.
It's just something about the feel of their helmets on my fists.
Zeb, without a doubt, gets the biggest laughs from me throughout the series and is performed expertly by longtime actor Steve Blum, who offers a weight to the big lug and gets you to side with Zeb from the very second that you see him, despite the snarls and disapproving looks, and honestly is my favourite of the entire crew. Now to the daintiest of the group, but without a doubt the fiercest, and not simply by virtue of her lineage, the Mandalorian Sabine Wren. Forged from the fires across the galaxy and that of her own planet, Sabine is a fierce young woman who grew up around war, which forced her to mature quicker than you'd expect of any child. Her family is in high standing on Mandalore, and following her actions as part of the Imperial Academy, she was ostracized by them, deeming her a traitor to all of Mandalore, considering the fact that a lot of her equipment and tech was used as weapons against the people of Mandalore. The familial strain is explored tenderly throughout the show, alongside the impact that this has all had on her, and it essentially becomes a psychological study into her character. And as the show continues, we steadily see her ascending from a story of despair to one of relief, where she overcomes struggles and tribulations with the support of both her families. Then, to wrap up our quick character assessments, we have our mother of the group, Hera Syndulla, who is often accompanied by her disgruntled and psychopathic droid, Chopper.
It's his fault.
Don't care. I'm crushing you both.
Hera is without a doubt one of the most courageous women in Star Wars, who constantly course corrects her crew and rarely allows herself to stumble, often relying on her heart to determine her decisions, but is equally as logical and thoughtful in her process and is highly sympathetic. Her past is wrapped up in war over the planet of Ryloth that was under constant bombardment from the Separatists in the Clone Wars, with the Republic repeatedly sent in to support the planet until the Empire rose to power.
Well, that's fucking not good.
And all alongside her father and leader of the resistance on world, Sham Syndulla, constantly creating issues for all parties involved, and grows forgetful of the fact that he is a father. She learnt from an early age how to approach various situations in a mature and nuanced manner very quickly due to what occurred around her, and thanks to her mother Alini as well, who was lost before this time in the series. And that has brought a mother figure out who possesses an affinity for flying, encouraged by her escapade alongside the Bad Batch within their first season as well. And we can't forget that all of this was achieved as well by her found droid Chopper, who she pulled from the wreckage of a ship outside of her home. They work about as well as Jam and Marmite, but there's an unspoken loyalty to each other, and they possess a relationship that even I'm fucking jealous of. Chopper is easily one of the best droids in the franchise, being constantly given kill spots and laughable moments that will make lasting memories, but can be presented as a big old softie as well, when he understands that a member of the group is struggling from time to time and is willing to protect those around him as well. Now, with all those insights in our minds, it's fair to say that this bunch of bananas have a lot to contend with both personally and externally, when the Empire as well are continuing to throw everything from their arsenal at the small cell of rebels that possess the greatest chance at leaving a mark on the burgeoning Imperial presence. And as this series shows us, it allows time to explore both these aspects, with richly intense personal affairs being explored and resolved with cathartic results that double back on themselves eventually, whether it be a season or two apart, and equally give the audience insights to the Empire's greatest plans and also reveal their biggest shortcomings, as seen here in their opening episode, where none of them had the ingenuity to combat even Sabine walking and chucking an explosive on the side of their speeder.
That's a little fucked up, no?
Oh, it's super fucked up.
This is obviously a creative decision to give the younger viewers an idea of who the good and bad are in this, and doesn't carry over into every episode, but for now at least, it is ridiculous as it is amusing. And I've got to end off by saying right now that this motley crew of misfits are hands down Star Wars' first family, who all possess a little something that someone can relate to, accompanied with perfectly timed humour and beautifully crafted escapades that provide context for events in the movies and call back a cast of beloved heroes and villains from previous shows shows, movies, and books to pack out this compact 4-season arc. Overall, for a debut episode, there's not much to discuss here as it's the first part of 2, but it is a highly enjoyable one, assuming that you can look past the stylization, and it offers a delightful time with the threat of Vader and the Grand Inquisitor looming over it at the start, which I'll get into at a later date, but for now at least, you know that these guys are more than capable at combating whatever comes their way, so long as they do it together. Anyway, that's all I've got for this one, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure to come back next week for my thoughts regarding the actual plot of both episodes with the full context of what's involved. Subscribe for more and leave a like on this video, and until then everyone, take care, may the Force be with you, and happy May the 4th.